All right, gang. It's about that time. I know it's a little bit overtime, but for some reason, we're having some issues with the internet tonight. No worries. We're going to get the show on the road. We're going to put together something that you guys are going to love, I promise you. My guest tonight is John Barbour. Thank you guys for coming tonight. I see lots of familiar faces out there in the audience. Just want to say thank you to all my mods, to my girlfriend, to my mother, to all of my friends here, my audience, and the people I love. Thank you guys. Glad you're here. Thank you, Eric Leonis. I see Patriots from Michigan, FEMA Region 9, New York City, Las Vegas, Boston, Massachusetts, slow mode's on, Nantucket Island, Massachusetts, Minnesota, chat is slowed down now, guys, Annapolis, Maryland, New York, Chicago, Idaho, Pittsburgh, Wisconsin, Florida, Idaho, New Jersey, Arizona, Kansas, Kentucky, Illinois, Virginia. All right, guys. All right, guys, thank you so much once again for joining us. I want to say thank you to everyone who has taken the time to be here tonight. You know it means so much to me, and I know that it means so much to my next guest. That would be Emmy award-winning producer and director, John Barbour. John, hello, sir. Welcome to the program. Oh, John, hold on just a second. You were still muted, sir. There you go.
Okay. You have no idea how excited I am to be with you, Zachary. You have none whatsoever, and I think that's fabulous. At the top of the show, you acknowledge the people that are tuning in to watch it. Your show has a phenomenal reputation for doing shows about politics, which are terrific. They're immensely interesting. You talk about politics, and you talk about the murder of John Kennedy. And so to be here with you tonight is like having a shot of intellectual adrenaline, but even more than that, it's a shot of hope that you give me to know that somebody like you, because I've never seen you before. How can you be this young and this interested in the murder of John Kennedy, and how it is that Jim Garrison decided to pick me to tell his story,
Yes.
Other than Oliver Stone, who made that great film, JFK, because you weren't even born when John Kennedy was murdered, and you weren't even born when Jimmy Hoffa was murdered. So I must tell you, I am so thrilled to be here, and I'm in your hands. I feel like you're in your Allstate, and I'm in good hands. But let me ask you the very first question.
Sure.
How on earth did somebody like you, so young? I mean, you must be half my age, for God's sake, or less.
I'll be 42 this year.
Well, then you're less than half my age. How did somebody like you become interested in doing this kind of show? What made you so aware that things needed to be changed in America?
Well, I would say it was learning about the assassination of President Kennedy at a very young age. My mom, who was alive when he was when they removed him, she told me the story of what happened, and she told me point blank that the official narrative was not true. And we read a book, I believe it was by Jim Garrison, On the Trail of the Assassins. And maybe it wasn't by him, but it was
Yes, he wrote it.
Okay, good. Okay. So I was very young, like 7, something like that. And so I followed it and kind of, tried to read as much as I could about it, did as much research on it just from a very young age. And I knew that if it was possible for rogue elements of our own government and our intelligence agencies, if it was possible for them to remove a sitting U.S. president, somebody who was extremely popular, who was doing incredible things for this country, that was probably not going to be where they stopped, and it was just going to get worse and worse and worse from there. So that kind of led me down the rabbit hole, if you will, and I started, just branching off and looking into other things. And I'm amazed, the older I get and the more that I see at how much each of these subjects all kind of link back to the same point,
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It is the magic box of what is wrong with America,
Mm-hmm.
because that magic box about the murder of John Kennedy, which Jim Garrison solved, and we'll get to that much later, is a cold case at the Justice Department. You open that Pandora's box of propaganda and proof, and all of America's problems will be understood and resolved.
Absolutely.
So I know we don't want to start off talking about anything political, but I just want to say something briefly political before we go on here. As you know from reading my book,
Right.
Your Mother's Not a Virgin.
Probably the best title ever, by the way.
Yes, as a matter of fact, it came about because of an accidental conversation with Jim Garrison.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the first time I tried to book him on the air. So we'll get to that later. But in any event, as you know from reading it, it's called, the subtitle is The Bumpy Life and Times of the Canadian Dropout Who Changed the Face of an American Television.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you said you were 42 years of age.
Yep.
Right now.
Right now.
When I was 46, I had quit the business and was unemployed. And I was the only one in television history to win Emmys for both news and entertainment.
Really?
But because I had tried to book Garrison on a couple of my shows, I was persona non grata, not only in the media, in Hollywood.
Really?
And a year later, as if I hate to use the word divine because I'm non-religious, but by divine intervention, I had the #1 show in the history of America, Real People, watched by 50% of everybody watching television at the time. Now,
that's incredible.
I say that because from reading the book, you also know I was deported twice.
Yes.
I was deported once when I was 17 because I came here to be a gambler. That's what I wanted to do as a living. And I was deported again when I was 29. When I was in 1977, when I was just a little older than you, I was handed my citizenship papers by Senator John Tunney of California. Ever since then, I have successfully predicted every presidential election in the United States.
That's beautiful.
And it has nothing to do with my being a political pundit, Zachary. I'm not. But I was a comic. And when you make jokes, the person that gets the biggest laughs is the loser.
Yep.
And in 2016, the one who got the biggest laughs was Hillary.
Yes, that's
now,
correct.
You may recall in 2016, even conservatives like Rush Limbaugh were upset because, oh my God, Hillary is going to become president of the United States. Everybody in the mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, all of them predicted that. I was the only one I knew of. I had a show like yours. And I said, don't be surprised, Donald Trump is going to be president of the United States. Well, you have no idea how many viewers I lost when I made that particular statement. And by God, they came back when, of course, he became president.
Voila.
Now, okay, so now I just want to say this, that he was the least impeachable president since the murder of John Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
They could have gotten Lyndon Baines Johnson as a war criminal for the fake Gulf of Tonkin resolution that got us illegally into Vietnam. You could have impeached and even hung both Bushes,
mm-hmm.
George Bush Sr. for the Iran-Contra hostage debacle in which he committed treason and sabotaged Jimmy Carter, who would have been reelected. And then, of course, George Bush Jr., who lied us into Vietnam with weapons of Iraq with weapons of mass destruction. And the least impeachable president was Donald Trump. I mean, it was just a phone call. And by the way, it has just come out that the whistleblower who blew the whistle about the Ukraine phone call, guess who he works for? The CIA.
Clowns in America.
There you go. And a lot of people are interested in, and my film, The American Media and the Second Assassination of President John F. Kennedy, is a runaway hit on Amazon just by word of mouth. And a lot of people believe that the same forces who did in John Kennedy are at work to do in Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
Which indeed may be true. Okay, but I just want to say this before we get it, because I liked it to tell you the birth of real people in the book and the rest of it.
Yep.
It's Joe Biden. Okay. Isn't this America for you? The more Joe Biden talks and reveals that he might have Alzheimer's
mm-hmm.
or more political gaffes and more malaprops that he makes, only in America could somebody like that get more votes.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to say this, the last thing I'm going to say about it. If Joe Biden, first of all, the Democrats, by trying to impeach Trump, should have just handed Donald Trump the keys to the White House for the next 8 or 12 years, for crying out loud, because that was an unbelievable blunder. But if it is Biden, and he gets up and he thanks the delegates for choosing him, I guarantee you this is what he is going to say. I would like to thank all of the delegates who chose me as their candidate because they know I am the only one who can beat Ronald Reagan. And I must tell you, in Reagan's condition today, he could walk away with the election against Joe Biden. So that's all I want to say about politics.
I think you're very right on with that. So John, you can just call me Red on the Zach Voorhees is the Google whistleblower. We look alike, but just call me Red or RP on the air, okay, buddy?
Oh, well, okay. Listen, I must tell you, I love your logo. First of all, I love the title Red Pill 78, but you show those red pills up there.
Yeah.
And from watching you, I must tell you, you don't imbibe those pills. No. You smoke them. What is it?
Smoking the truth.
That's funny. That's funny.
John, let me give a couple of quick thank yous to the audience. I got some super chats. I already said thank you to Eric. Chris Hawkins, he says, from one 70s and 80s kid to another, I like your intros. Thank you very much, Chris. That's why I do that. Dana Finkler, multiple thank yous. He says, 66 days until the thick ankle dog face goes down. 66 days? When does that happen, Dana? You got a specific date on Hillary Clinton's arrest? He also says, JFK is my favorite, and also he saw you, John, on the Tinfoil Hat podcast.
I love that. I love Sam Tripoli.
Sam is amazing.
Yes, he is. As a matter of fact, the day... it was right after Martin Luther King's birthday, because I must tell you, and I'm being immodest here, but aside from being probably one of the most knowledgeable people about the murder of John Kennedy because of my association with Jim Garrison and having access to all of his files, which we'll talk about later, because the CIA has yet to release them. Well, I am starting to release them. In any event, I just am so excited to be here. So thank you again.
Good, no problem. I'm glad you're here.
But I was going to say about Martin Luther King's birthday.
Yeah.
Sam called me and he said, "Do you ever talk about Martin Luther King?" Now I know not all about Martin Luther King, about Robert Kennedy, because along with Thomas Noguchi's attorney in the early '80s, I had formed a citizens committee to retain Thomas Noguchi as the politically independent coroner of the county of Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And the reason they tried to get rid of Noguchi, and it's in the film, he would not change his autopsy report. The bullet that murdered John Kennedy was fired no more than an inch and a half or two from the back of his head.
Really?
Because of the extensive powder burns. We show the autopsy report. He would not change it. And of course, we lost. And eventually, and I had been Frank Sinatra's private writer for 4.5 years. And it was over the Robert Kennedy thing that he and I finally parted company, which we may or may not get into. And also, Martin Luther King was his widow, Coretta, and the sons were represented by a lawyer named William Pepper, mm-hmm. who also was the lawyer for Sirhan Sirhan.
Yes.
I had on my show a couple of times. Well, a couple of years ago, he was able to convince, because they had a witness who was paid $100,000. He owned the restaurant behind the Lorraine Motel. And he was hired to let the killers plan their shooting mm-hmm. from that spot.
Yep.
And Coretta King brought a civil suit against the federal government for conspiracy to murder her husband and the father of her children. She won the case.
Yes, yes.
And she could have asked for millions. And guess how much she asked for?
How much?
$1,000.
That's a paltry sum.
That was all it took to bury her husband.
Yeah.
That's all she wanted. She didn't want to benefit from the murder of her husband. Anyway, Sam asked me if I would come on and spend an hour talking about Martin Luther King. And I said, I will do this the one time. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you why I say that, because you so smartly said earlier in this show that the linchpin to everything was the murder of John Kennedy.
Yep.
And I said, I could tell you all kinds of facts about Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King and John Lennon and 911, because people are always asked after me, John, speak about that. No, I refuse to, because it is distracting. Mm-hmm. It all lies with the Justice Department cold case, the murder of John Kennedy.
Absolutely.
That's all we have to do is open that Pandora's box. I said, but for you, Sam, I'll come on and I'll do an hour, and that's all. I don't want to talk about it again. I love that man, and I love his show.
Sam is amazing.
And because of his show, literally thousands of people go to Amazon every mm-hmm. month to watch the film. I only get $1 from it. I will never get back the $500,000
sure.
that I spent for 40 years trying to tell Jim's story. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
No.
I am a storyteller.
This is no theory, though. It's no theory. It's really happening.
No, that's right. It's not a theory. And what kept me alive when I was a kid, coming from a broken family and living on the streets when I was 6, was listening to Lorne Greene on the CBC. Lorne Greene had an Orson Welles type of voice. He ended up coming to America, and he was Ben Cartwright in Bonanza. But as a kid, I was glued to the radio listening to him. A guy named Gordon Sinclair wrote books about real people. So when I was a kid, it was at movies and it was in the library. It was the listening to and the reading of stories that kept me going. And now that I'm twice your age, it's the telling of them. So if you want to get to some of them, delighted to take the ride with you down the yellow brick road.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll get into it in just one moment. Let me finish up these thank yous to the audience. Let's see. Michael Thomas says, POTUS is the modern day Cyrus, I believe. I don't know if you're familiar with the story from the Bible about Cyrus, some connections between him and the things that POTUS is doing today. Red Pill Doc says, explain to him that you are not the Google whistleblower. Yes, I did. Just thank you, Red Pill Doc. This guy's name is D's Nuts Beat, and then the word dragon. These nuts be dragon. Throw me some pics, bro. I'm ready to start. Yes, he is. He's making me a custom tomahawk, you guys. You're going to see it here on the air. It's going to be amazing. I've seen some of his work. Q-Wife Magalife says, oh my God, I love this guy. He's hilarious with an obvious, genuine heart of gold. Thank you both for being here with us. Thank you, Q-Wife. Then Hey Jude says, watched John's movie last year. I loved it. I've been a researcher on the assassination for 30 years. And then Chris Hawkins says, conspiracy fact. All right, so let's make our way naturally to the point at which you met Jim Garrison. So you came here when you were a young man from Canada with stars in your eyes and an idea
Wait a minute. I didn't come here. I snuck here.
You snuck here.
So yeah. So I would like to tell you, there are a lot of I tell you that I'm a non-believer, but from reading the book, you'll find that there was divine intervention in my life. All of the great things that happened to me by accident, Zachary.
I think that
all of the disasters were the things that I planned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little story about my first deportation.
Okay.
And it may take a few minutes, but there is foreshadowing here because it includes Sinatra and it includes real people.
Okay.
I was born in the Salvation Army charity ward. And I came from a family that would have to be mended just to be considered dysfunctional. And when I was 6 before I learned that my name wasn't that's enough. Okay. And my father, it was so bad. My father enlisted in the Canadian Army when I was 6 in 1939 to go to the peace and quiet of World War II. And my mother brought into the house uncles. And so there were grapes. They came in bunches, and they came to bed with her, and they came to booze with her, but mostly they came to beat her. And as a kid, unable to defend your mother, it kills you. And so I would run frequently to the police station. Now, pretty soon I was good. When you come from the background like that, Zachary, you want attention. But when it's bad and it's brutal, you don't get it by doing good things, by playing the violin or playing the accordion. You do it by stealing and doing terrible things.
Of course.
So I was at the police station a lot, taken there by the police. And fortunately, when I would get out, I'd walk across the street because that's where the library was. Well, I was 12 years of age, living on the streets most of the time. And a prominent American boxer took my mother to Buffalo to spend the weekend with her in Buffalo. The only friend that I had that was remotely religious or pleasant was a kid named Don Lee. He lived on Scarborough Road. I lived on Lawler Avenue. My other friends and I were always getting into trouble. Don never swore. He always hung around with us and never made a negative observation or anything. I really liked him, but the thing about him, he had a mother and father that was the only together family I knew. The first suicide I heard of was one of my playmates across the street. His mother, we were going to play hockey one day, and he woke up and his mother's head was in the oven. First suicide I ever heard of. I had a number of suicides in my own. I've known more people who've committed suicide than who died of natural causes. But in any way, I go over to Don. His name was Don Lee. I go over to Don's house. And the reason I don't call is I don't want them to say no. So Mrs. Lee, a very sweet lady, invites me in. And I asked her if she would adopt me.
Aww.
And she said, John, no, you've got a mother. Well, I was a smart mouth kid even then. I said, yeah, you want proof? Come on over to my house. It's empty. And it's going to be empty until Monday. So she didn't believe me. And she said, no, we can't do that. And then she said to me, have you ever been to church? And I said, did they circumcise you in a church? And she said, yes. And I said, well, I've been to church once. So she laughed and she said, well, how would you like to come to church with us? And I said, I'd love to. I just wanted to be with somebody. So she gave me a book. And I said, what's this? She says, it's a Bible. So go ahead and read it. Well, I'm a reading junkie because I'm 12 years of age. I read everything. Not only did I read it, I memorized it from Genesis to Leviticus, for crying out loud.
Wow.
She moved to where they lived because they were right across from a Baptist church. And the minister did something very smart. In the middle of a sermon, he would stop. And he would then say to the congregation, it is now your private minute with God. You all have something you want to talk about to God in his house. So This minute is yours. God, it was wonderful. It was so serene and peaceful. And of course, I prayed when I would get home, my father would be there.
Mm-hmm.
So when the service was over, I didn't go to Lee's house for sandwiches. I would just run home. And I literally, first 2 weeks, I opened the door hollering for my father.
Oh.
And there's no answer. So after 4 weeks of this, I think, oh my God, this is not working. And then around the 10th week, I thought, I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting my time. So the next time the minister said, okay, take your private minute, I got up and I walked out. And I sat on the concrete steps waiting. And everybody stared at this kid walking out. And I sat down. Immediately, the minister runs out and he sees me sitting there. And he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, John, are you all right? Zachary, that was the first time I almost cried because it's the first time anybody touched me. And then he said, what's wrong? And I said, sir, this isn't working for me. He says, what's not working, John? And I says, I pray every day I come here. I said, I don't pray at home because I wet the bed and I don't want to be praying from a bed that smells of pee. And people around started to giggle. And I said, so I come here and he's never there. It's just not for me. So he puts his other arm on my shoulder and embraces me. And I feel warm. And he said, John, you must understand God's will. Everybody got quiet. And I looked up and I smiled and I said, I don't think I'm in his will. Well, they started to laugh. And he shook me. He said, don't let Satan take over your life. Now, I'm a know-nothing kid. And I said, hold it a minute, sir. Do you believe in Satan? Now he gets angry. And he said, absolutely, there's a Satan. I don't know where it came from, Zachary. I said, well, what makes you believe there's a God then? Isn't that proof there's no God? How dare you say that? Well, I said, well, you tell us every day in your sermons, he is all powerful. If he's all powerful, why doesn't he get rid of this guy? Now the folks are really angry at me. That ended my relationship with Don Lee. Now, 35 years later, I have, by accident, got the most popular show in history called Real People. And what we used to do is we would go up and down the aisle looking for people just to say, welcome to Real People, or we'll be right back with more Real People. And I'm walking up the aisle of the second show. And there's this guy in front of me who's about 45 or 46 years of age with a pleasant round face. And it's Don Lee. And I said, Donald. And he said, John. And I said, yeah. So we got up and I explained to the audience how I wanted his mother and father to adopt me. And he said to the audience, oh my God, I'm so glad she didn't adopt you because somebody else would be up there and you'd be sitting next to me.
There you go.
And that happened all my life. So now when I sneak into the country, I'm 17. From the ages of 15 to 17, everything I can steal, I was good at it. Everything I could earn selling papers or working, I lost in all-night gambling orgies. I was the first to lose and the last to leave. And then one day I said, geez, I'm not here to make money. I'm here to make friends. But who wants to be friends with people like these, for God's sake? I don't want to be a gambler. So I figured if I was going to do it, I'd learn to do it. So I got 2 books, Scarney on Dice, Scarney on Cards. And like the Bible, I memorized them. And in 3 months, I won $700.
Very
and
nice.
what I did is I went out and I bought this blue suit that you see. This is me when I'm 17 years of age, black and white picture. The only one I had of me, the only other pictures of me are in the police department or the immigration department, right? And it's in front of Bugsy Siegel's old Flamingo Hotel in Lake Tahoe. I bought the hat so I'd look old enough to gamble. What happened? I'm on the train. I have no luggage. And in northern Nevada, the train has stopped. And I think, oh, geez, the cops have called Union Pacific and said, oh, you got this thief escaping to America named Johnny Barbour. We got to get him. That was in my head.
The infamous Johnny Barbour.
Infamous Johnny Barbour. So I get on a bus, and the bus ends up in Lake Tahoe in front of the Calneva Lodge. God, it was like looking at a set from MGM, Zachary. I couldn't wait to get in there and see Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, doing a show. And I got to the end of the crab table, and I was nervous because I'm only 17 and they can see I'm a kid, but they can't because of the hat. And I'm doing okay. And people are starting to look at me. And I think, oh my God, maybe they know I'm 17, or maybe they know I know what I'm doing. But then I realized they're looking behind me. And when I turn around to look behind me, walking through the front door is Frank Sinatra.
Wow.
With his black top coat over his shoulder like an Italian Superman. And he's arm in arm with Sam Giancana, the mafioso chieftain of Chicago. And the reason I recognized him because the paper I left on the train for the cops to find, the front page story was about Giancana. Wow. And they were flanked by 3 Italians. 1 week earlier at the Manor Theater, as the clouds roll by, was the movie. The movie closes with Sinatra on a white pedestal in a white tuxedo, singing Old Man River, every bit as movingly as the greatest artist and political activist in American history, Paul Robeson. And I was, here he is walking by me. And then 25 years later, by accident, I become Frank Sinatra's private writer for 4.5 years. So now I want to get, if you want to get to this business of the first deportation.
Yes. Well, we're at 9:40 right now, so we've only got 20 minutes or so before the audience starts calling in. So,
okay. Gosh. Great. We're going to talk to the audience.
We're going to talk to the audience.
Okay. Then I'll try to do this as quickly as I can.
Okay.
The reason I stopped gambling is because I was successful at it, and my game was single deck blackjack. In those days, they only had single deck, and that had nothing to do with card gambling. It had to do the odds. I was at the Flamingo Hotel, and I could only gamble an hour or 2 a day because I'd either lose a little or I'd win enough, and I'm doing pretty well. But I would stop. I have nothing else to do for 22 hours. There are no movies to go to, so I go to the shows. There's Noel Coward at the Desert Inn. There's Edith Piaf at the Desert Inn, and my favorite, Joey Lewis and Lily St. Cyr at the El Rancho. And my God, I just love these. So I'm at the blackjack table, and I feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience. There is no joy in what I'm doing. I'm a mathematician. I'm playing odds. This is horrible. I picked up my chips and cashed them in. I've never gambled since. I have never gambled since except on a golf course. And I never swear in my act because I feel uncomfortable using that kind of language. But there are 2 places where profanity is required and necessary. And that's golf and sex.
We don't swear here on the program either.
Yeah, so there you go.
You're in good company.
Great. I cannot talk about it. So I decided to go to Hollywood, and I am in a rooming house, 17 years of age. We have an old-time film star in there, and they're all males. We have a 45-year-old jeweler named Lenny who sold everything. He was very well-to-do. His wife committed suicide, and he moved in there. And I used to sit at his feet all the time. He sort of adopted me and told me the story about his Jewish heritage and the pogroms in Russia, and how when they came to the United States and they were able to buy land for the first time. And he used to tell me about FDR. And we would have these great dinners at the house. And there was a 28-year-old accountant who was very, very, very conservative. He called himself a proud young Republican, 28 years of age. You won't remember, your parents might remember, but in those days, people used to wear pins that would say better red than dead.
Yes.
And I said to him jokingly in front of the people,
is it better dead than red?
Yeah, better dead than red. That was it. Better dead than red. And I said to him, why would you want to be dead? Just change colors, for crying out loud. People would giggle. And I'd say, if I could afford a suit like that, I wouldn't have a pin like that in there. I'd have a rose in there, or a carnation, or a poppy for the veterans, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. So people loved these exchanges, but he didn't. And he started in on FDR one day. And he said, that guy's a commie. And God made him crippled. because he's a commie. And to make it worse, he gave him Eleanor to wake up and look at. She was so ugly because he's a commie. So I didn't know anything about anything.
Sure.
I said, hold it. I heard you talking about the fact that your grandfather is collecting Social Security. I think you should send a thank you note to the Roosevelt family, because with the New Deal, he instituted things like Social Security and 8-hour workday and free education to save America from socialism and retain capitalism. So you should thank him. And I said, and by the way, I said, when I go out to the golf course or drive around, I see roads or schools or golf courses named after Roosevelt. And he says, right, created we were in a depression until the war started. I said, hold it. Wasn't it a Republican named Hoover that started the recession? And everybody started applauding except him. And I said, what did they name after Hoover? I think a vacuum cleaner. Wow. People started howling and he got up and left. So I went upstairs. I was going to get my bathing suit and hitchhike to Santa Monica, which you could do in those days. There's a knock at the door. I hear the knock and I look down, and 2 guys in blue suits, flashing FBI badges. Is John Barbour here? The guy had called the cop. He got he was going to get the last laugh.
Oh, man.
So I rushed to the window to jump out the window, and there are 2 other FBI cars waiting for me to jump into their arms. So when they come into the room, said, John Barbour, and I said, yes. They said, what are you trying to do? I said, escape. So show us your visa, please. And I said, I don't have one. He said, did you come to the country illegally? And I said, no, sir. I walked across Buffalo, and I just said I would be here for a couple of days. He said, how many days ago was that? I said, 417 days. So he said, well, come with me. So they put me in handcuffs, took me out. A couple of people were crying, except the accountant. He was thumbs up
He's
for the
happy
cop.
about it.
They got this Canadian commie. Well, when they looked at the fingerprints and stuff, they found out that I was not a threat either to the American government or the Canadian government. I was just a threat to some store owners in Toronto, and that was it. So they sentenced me to it was called Terminal Island in San Diego. It should have been a resort. We were on the 3rd floor, about 40 or 50 bunks. Nearly everyone was Mexican. I was the only Canadian, because they said, we don't deport you by singles. He says, we gather you. One of the guards said, we gather you up like Canadian geese. And a whole flock of Canadians are sent back north instead of coming south.
So did you have to wait until enough Canadians were arrested?
That's it. But I was going to escape.
Okay.
Because and so I planned the perfect escape. I had been there 6 months, for crying out loud.
Regular Steve McQueen.
Okay, and you're right. That's it. Oh, that's right. Devil's Island. That's it. That's right. Papillon.
Papillon.
Papillon. Steve McQueen. So here I was. I knew if I go 50 yards west, there's a gate and there's a guard, but he's not armed. And I knew the busiest days, and I could walk out there easily. And at the other side, it was all bay. And if I couldn't get this way, I was going to swim out to a boat. I was going to be in a merchant marine or something.
There you go.
I was going to get out of there. We're on the 3rd floor, and I don't speak Spanish. And the guy next to me, Jorge, he did not speak English. So like Sid Caesar pantomiming, I tell him, because he's in charge of gathering all the clothing, and they send it down a chute to be cleaned. And I pantomime that I want to get into the clothing canvas basket and have them send me down the chute. So this is all going to be secret, right?
Sure.
And he has a maid who's going to help out, and I think everything's secret. The morning I'm going to do it, an Englishman comes by and wishes me luck. A Frenchman comes by and wishes me luck. And a bunch of Chicanos come by and wishing me buena suerte. And so I think everybody knows I'm going to try to escape. One of the guys did something that happened at Dealey Plaza. He faked being sick and fainting. while the guards were by the chute.
Yes.
And so they got me into the thing, and down the chute I went. Now, I didn't know what was going to be at the bottom. It could have been concrete.
Right.
And fortunately, I landed in all this dirty laundry with the only clothes I had, and I rushed to the door. It was a Wednesday, perfect middle of the week. It should be open, and it's locked. Then I go to the south door, and it's locked, and I keep running back and forth, and I thought, oh, my God, there was one more door, but I couldn't open it because I knew it led to the office. So I sat down in the dirty clothing, and I fell asleep.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm awakened by a guard, and the guard says the same thing as the FBI guy did. He says out loud to himself, oh, my, a live body in the dead laundry. He said, what are you trying to do? And I said, escape. So he howls, and he takes me up to the office, and they interrogate me for an hour because they want to know who and it was July 4th on Wednesday. And they wanted to know who all the conspirators were who helped me. And they were going to sentence me to another 6 months. And of course, I did not say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And they lead me back up to the third floor, and they let me go, and everybody is watching me. And then I turn around and I said, hey, hold it. It's Wednesday. Why on earth is everything locked up? And he starts to howl, and he says, it's July 4th. It's a holiday. So my nickname from that time on was Julio Cuatro. Anyway, okay, I'm 17. And 20 some odd years later, I get a letter. And it's from the guard who found me in the dirty clothes. And the letter says, John, you got to tell me, hold it. This is really the same John Barbour. I'm telling my wife and my kids and my neighbors, I'm telling you, this is a guy I found in the dirty laundry trying to escape here. Is it you? I sent him back the most beautiful picture of me with Sarah Purcell in a $600 suit. And I said, I've been thinking about him and looking for him for a long time, because if it hadn't been for him, I would be either in the Merchant Marine or in prison by now.
There you go. Yeah.
So there you go.
All right. Well, that's an awesome story. John, let me just give me the rest of the thank yous here. Let's see. Michael Thomas says, I feel the first arrest will be a big one. In my opinion, Adam Schiff is not big enough to be considered biblical. RP78 is the best truther out there. Former Dem here disgusted with what they've become. Excellent. Thank you very much, Michael. Dana Finkler wants to know if you have any information about how much George Bush Sr. was involved in the plot to murder the president. The Mandalorian says, popcorn, RP78, M3 in the chat. April Mendoza says, great show, RP78. What brand is your vape juice? And I will give you a clue right here. It's called Wet. I use Wet liquids, you guys. It's delicious. And then I also use Juice Head. It's called Juice Head. Both
great questions. And about George Bush Sr.,
yeah,
he was a major player in the murder of John Kennedy, and it's all in the film. First of all,
well, yeah, let's talk about how you came to meet Jim Garrison.
The business to answer his question, which was a really thoughtful question. The Bay of Pigs operation was called by the Central Intelligence Agency Zapata, codename Zapata.
Same as the oil company.
George Bush's oil company was Zapata Oil.
Yes.
And the two boats used by the rebels to get to the Bay of Pigs were first the Barbara, his wife, and the other was called the Houston.
Wow.
And in the film, you will see a picture of somebody who was the spitting image of George Bush in Dealey Plaza. And then there is also in the movie a memo from J. Edgar Hoover, who hated Bush, hated the CIA because they were doing a lot of the stuff he was supposed to be doing. And he said, we have a message here from George Bush of the CIA about an attempt on the life of John Kennedy by a guy named Perot.
Yep.
That is all in the film, and thanks for that question.
And
is it great?
Also, George H.W. Bush famously said very late in life, I believe it was after he was president, that he didn't remember where he was at the time of the assassination.
Yeah, exactly.
Who doesn't remember that? I remember where people were, and I wasn't alive yet.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, everybody knows where they were at that time. And also, he's quoted in the movie as saying, and you see it, if people really knew what we were up to, they'd chase us down the street and hang us.
Exactly.
And that was after he betrayed the United States and President Carter and rearranged the deal for the release of the hostages after Ronald Reagan became president. And I'll tell you a story told to me by a cameraman of who filmed the CIA awards. Now they get their Emmys and their Grammys,
yes,
and they're given decorations, and afterwards the decorations are removed from them, and they videotape them. And it's all secret. They had all around it. You've seen it in offices. They had the poster of Ronald Reagan, president, George Bush, vice president. And guess what they did at the CIA in Langley?
They
as a joke.
They made George Bush
tore
president.
Reagan off, and all you could see was George Bush. And then guess who gets shot at a little while later?
Yep.
Ronald Reagan. So anyway, I met you. You started asking me about Garrison, meeting him.
Right.
Well,
before you tell that story, I just want, we've had a lot of people asking where they can watch the film. And I know you said Amazon.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
You can get, for these folks, you can get the first award-winning film. It's called The Garrison Tapes. You go to johnbarbersworld.com. Not only can you see the Garrison Tapes first film free, which won the San Sebastian Film Festival Award, you can also see the Garrison Files, which the CIA, even urged by the President of the United States, will not release. I have started to release the Garrison Files. If you go to the ones marked Clay Shaw or Lee Harvey Oswald, you never have to buy my book, buy anybody's book. You never have to look at any video. Those two files alone will convince you Jim Garrison solved the case. And I hope we get to the contents of those a little bit later.
Yeah.
So, but the second one, I was inspired to write it and do it 2.5 years ago, when President Trump, then one of the Republicans running for office, started to talk about fake news.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I knew about fake news because I worked in it, but was never made public. And when I was signed by Westinghouse to replace Merv Griffin, my producer was supposed to be Roger Ailes.
Ooh.
Roger Ailes became president of Fox. And
Yes,
when we would talk about the stuff I would do on the show, if I got to be the host, Roger, as a kid, even younger than you, not as good looking as you, but younger than you, and a lot heavier than you, he said, John, it's not what you put on the news that changes the world. It's what you don't put on the news.
Yes.
And we are underinformed and misinformed. Will Rogers said it during the fake Spanish-American War. Why are we going to the Philippines to rob those people and murder 200,000 innocent people just for the gold in their ground? Okay. And he was the first anti-imperialist, Mark Twain. And he said, if you read American newspapers, you're uninformed. If you if you don't read American newspapers, you're uninformed. But if you do, you're misinformed.
Mm.
And then he went on to say, it was Jim Garrison's favorite quote about Mark Twain. He said, it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. So,
absolutely.
Anyway, how I accidentally, and you know another Mark Twain quote? Oh my God. Since you have 2 cats,
yes,
and I have 3 that are rescued, Mark Twain said, of course, show me a guy who loves cats, and that's all I need to know about it. So, but you also have a couple of dogs. But Mark Twain said, okay, I'm asking you, Zachary, what is the difference between a cat and a lie?
I don't know.
A cat only has 9 lives.
There you go. Yes.
A lie lives forever.
Yes, it does.
I mean, that is beyond genius. So in any event, you can get the American Media and the Second Assassination of President John F. Kennedy on iTunes, Vimeo, but on Amazon for only $2.
Okay.
And
Well,
it'll absolutely blow your mind. Now,
it looks like people are going to have to go to those other places, John, because so many people went to your website, it crashed.
Are you kidding?
I'm serious. I got lots of people telling me that it stopped working. So I've got it open myself.
Wait a second. Did somebody at the CIA go to my website? No.
That's very possible.
Okay, now I'm going to tell you. Donald Trump is talking about fake news.
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed Jim Garrison. After the first time I tried to book him on the air, and I got fired for trying to book him, it was 1970. Most successful morning show in America.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him briefly during the Vietnam War, and then I talked to him briefly when I was on with Sinatra. It's a great story about me and my conflicts with Johnny Carson for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And Sinatra put me on because he loved the fact that I was having this fight with Carson. I made a simple joke on the air. And I said, today for a comic, you don't have to write jokes to get a laugh. Write jokes about politicians to get laughs. All you have to do is quote them. And of course, Joe Biden has proven that. And then I brought up Watergate. And I said, Watergate maybe something that has put America on the brink of democracy. That got a huge ovation back in 1977, for God's sake. And Jim called me and he said, can I steal those lines? And I said, you could have anything you want. And he told me that some of the names at Watergate were involved with the murder of John Kennedy. And then in 1981, when I had the most successful show in America, and I accidentally find out the House Select Committee concludes 4 shots have been fired, therefore a conspiracy, turns it over to the Justice Department. I got the #1 show in the country. Nobody can stop me now. I'm telling Jim Garrison's story. So I call him in New Orleans. And the first thing I say, Mr. Garrison, do you feel vindicated? And he chuckled as only he could. He said, John, I feel like a blind man who got a very small trophy in a dark room because only I know I got it. He said, nobody is reporting this.
Yeah.
How brilliant is that? Now I'm going to tell you one simple story about what a wonderful human being Jim Garrison is. Now listen, he was a lot like John Kennedy, and he's a lot like maybe President Trump and a lot of other A-type personalities. He was a womanizer. Mm-hmm. But at least in Jim Garrison's case, he married the girl that he was running around with after his wife divorced him. But when his wife divorced him because of all the pressure, she was easy prey for a guy who married her and spent all her money. When I was doing Jim's story, he was on his deathbed. It could have been cancer, it could have been AIDS, it could have been anything. And I didn't want to know what it was. And I was dealing with his daughter, Elizabeth. She was the spokesperson. And he had already turned down Oliver Stone. Oliver Stone was making JFK. Bless his heart that he did that, because now we have the Records Assassination Act and that film for history, which also helped me do my first film. And Jim Garrison said to his daughter, no, Johnny is going to tell my story because he's lost 2 of the best shows in television trying to tell my story.
How kind of him.
And I want to help him. But he said they have 5 children and he's dying. And he says to his, he's got no wife now. He says to his daughter, Elizabeth, he says, Liz, get the kids. And my best friend is a minister. Get the minister and get a marriage certificate and get Liz, that's the mother, and have her come over here. I'm going to marry her. It's on his deathbed.
Yeah.
So they don't want to tell the mother that because they're estranged. They just bring her over to say goodbye to the father that is going to die any day now.
Right.
So she comes in there and she's kind of sad and she says, goodbye, Jim. And he says, not just yet. She said, what do you mean? He says, first we're going to get married. And she almost chokes. She said, what are you talking about? It didn't work the first time. He said, well, this time it's not going to last very long. So anyway, he marries her and she says, why are you marrying me now, for God's sake, when you're dying? He says, honey, I know what your last husband did to you. I get a very large pension as a judge. And when I die, it's not going to these 5 kids. It's going to you, because if I didn't have you, I wouldn't have these 5 wonderful kids.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That's what she lived on the rest of her life, was his
Wow.
pension. Well, that's the kind of man that Jim Garrison was. And you know that Oliver Stone spoke at the last Kappa conference. That's Citizens Against Political Assassinations. Dr. Cheryl Wett. I'm going to be the featured speaker this November with that film.
Beautiful.
And I've turned down everybody. Because they should be gathering at the Justice Department. November 22nd should be America's Bastille Day.
Mm-hmm.
Open the files, okay? And I think it's going to happen.
Yes.
And it will probably happen after November when they give the keys to Donald Trump to get back into the White House. But in any event, I'm so thrilled that your people are interested in this. Now, at Vimeo, which you can get all over the world, there are a lot of countries that don't have Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Vimeo is only $4.
Yep.
I don't know how much iTunes is, but that's where else you can get it. People in Canada can't get Amazon, but they do get Vimeo, where it's $4. So
yes.
And I must tell you, it is an unbelievably riveting view, and it's in 10 chapters, because we now live in a tweet world.
Sure.
People attention span, it's a very short attention span. So each one is labeled, and I'm telling you, it's Dallas before the CIA, Dallas after the CIA, and the media. The worst president in the United States, as you will see in the film, was Bill Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim Garrison, by the way, I'm going to put that on hold a second. Jim Garrison believed the Warren Report. And the reason he believed it, he never read it. Jim Garrison was an FBI agent.
Yes.
He was in the American military. He was at Dachau when they liberated that concentration camp. That was the only picture in his office, lest we ever forget. Dachau, he's a non-Jew, but still, that's the only photograph he had. It was an accidental meeting with Hale Boggs. Congressman Hale Boggs, Louisiana, was the only dissenting member of the Warren Report. And you can't read the dissent. You can't find it anywhere. And he's on a plane with Garrison, and they're just talking. And Hale Boggs said, Jim, you know what? I'm a hunter, and I killed a lot of things. But I'm telling you, that kid with that crooked Italian rifle and that scope that don't work right, he couldn't shoot no dead rabbit. And Garrison said, you mean? And he said, yeah, I mean. So Garrison got not only 26 volumes of the Warren Report,
Mm-hmm.
he got 3 sets. He put one in the car, one in the office, one at home, and memorized it. He was so terrific. Hale Boggs then later, after spending time with Garrison, went before Congress. It's in the congressional record. He calls Hoover a Nazi. And he said, we need to reinvestigate the murder of John Kennedy because the CIA and the FBI lied to us. Months later, he gets on a plane to Alaska, and the plane crashes and disappears. We never hear from Hale Boggs again. And guess who drove him to the airport?
A Clowns in America agent? A CIA agent?
Billy Clinton.
Bill Clinton.
He had been recruited along by Hillary when they were in college, for crying out loud. That's why Bill Clinton went to Russia. But when I say he's the worst president in history, listen, Bush destroyed Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Clinton destroyed America.
That's absolutely.
He signed NAFTA.
Yep.
I remember watching this adorable Ross Perot, the billionaire who would get up and buy time and debate with Clinton and Senior Bush. And I was a youngster, way younger than you when he was running. He's on stage and he points at Clinton. He said, you elect this guy, then you won't have a job in this country. And if you elect this Republican here, you still won't have a job because either one of them's going to sign NAFTA.
Yep.
And guess what? Billy Clinton signed it.
He sure did.
And the reason I lost my $1 million home in Toluca Lake is because of Bill Clinton, because the interest that I was earning from my pensions was paying the mortgage.
Mm.
But he repealed Glass-Steagall,
Mm-hmm.
which is signed into law by FDR to prevent Wall Street and the stock exchange from gambling on gambling.
Yes.
He repealed that, created the 2008 recession, and not one person went to jail. But worse than that, I'm going to tell you this. I don't care how much you like Donald Trump. The most important thing in the United States of America is not the president.
Oh,
it is the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights.
100%. Yes.
And the great comic said this, and he said, and the second greatest amendment is the second one, the right to bear arms, in case we don't get the first one enacted, which is a great joke.
It's very true.
I wish I could remember who did it, because it was a great joke. So in any event, I lost my home, as did millions of other people. And I'll tell you something else. People were after Bernie Sanders because he said something honest but nice about Castro.
Right.
Castro destroyed illiteracy in Cuba, which he did. But how many countries did Castro invade after he had a successful revolution?
It's true.
And something else that people don't know, we don't have time to talk about it, but we'll come back and talk about it. He was not a communist when he succeeded.
Yes, that's right. He became a communist.
Yeah, and you know who made him a commie?
What, Che Guevara?
United States of America made him a commie. Because at the time, he was hailed as Pancho Villa and Viva Zapata for being Batista. He was on the cover of Time magazine.
I remember.
He was on the Today Show. He's on the Jack Paar Show. And when he went to Harlem to eat chicken, 100,000 people showed up to eat chicken with Castro. I'll tell you later how we happened to do it if we get around to it. So, but how many countries has the United States invaded after the end of the Second World War? I think it's like 36 countries.
Yeah.
We don't need regime change in Iran. We didn't need it in Chile when they murdered a socialist, when Richard Nixon and the CIA and Kissinger murdered Salvador Allende, because he was going to confiscate Pepsi-Cola, which was what at the time Nixon was the attorney for Pepsi-Cola, and nationalize IT&T Telegraph. And they had to get rid of them. And so we murdered a lot of these people. We would need regime change, as POTUS is trying to do now in this country. And you know what? When Ho Chi Minh, they invaded Vietnam because the Paris Accords and the Geneva Accords called for an election between the North and the South. And the CIA was telling Eisenhower, oh my God, it looks like Ho Chi Minh is going to win. And the French had pulled out, so we had to start sending advisors there. All advisors that you'll see in the film that John Kennedy told Walter Cronkite, it's on camera, they're coming out. But what was coming out, of course, was John Kennedy. But what people don't know, Ho Chi Minh drafted his constitution based on the one drafted by Thomas Jefferson of the United States.
Absolutely.
People don't. But again, what the worst thing, when I'm talking about the First Amendment, in the mid-90s, when John Kennedy was killed, Zachary, there were 1,500 different owners of television and radio stations. Now there are only 5.
Yeah. Because
Bill Clinton signed the Communications Act, which turned all of America's communications over to 5 major corporations, all except 4%. And what I expect from Donald Trump when he gets the keys to the White House, the first thing I expect him to do is to reverse Clinton's Communications Act. And the next thing I expect him to do, because a lot of people don't know this, have you ever heard of Executive Order 11110?
It sounds familiar, but what exactly did that one specify?
This is a tidbit from the film, because it comes up because one of the guys on the Warren, those assigned to the Warren Commission, not one was a Kennedy supporter. There were mostly Republicans, and one was a banker. And Kennedy hated him. They had fights all the time. And why would a banker be appointed? Because John Kennedy, a year before he was murdered, signed an executive order called 11110.
Oh, to get back on the silver, gold and silver.
That's right, because at the time, if you borrowed money from a bank, let's say your house burned down or your barn burned down, you'd have to pay 21%. Now, the Federal Reserve is not federal, and it's not a reserve. It's 6 private families
Yes.
who own the banking system. And John Kennedy went to the Constitution and saw that the Treasury was mandated by the Constitution to print money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the same thing happened during the Civil War. Lincoln wanted to borrow money. It wasn't called the Federal Reserve then. It was just called the Central Bank. And they offered him money to fight the war at 33%. So he said, screw you, I'll print greenbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And with Kennedy, he signed this executive order. You see the money in the movie. I have money in my house. I can redeem it for silver.
Yep.
The minute he was shot in Dallas, the presses stopped.
Yep.
Absolutely stopped. So I would like to see President Trump reinstitute Executive Order 11110. Listen, I believe in free enterprise, so let these 6 families still have a bank.
Sure. Keep their banks,
Yep.
but we need to
Go
be
into
printing our
bank.
own money.
You know, there's the only public bank I know of is one of the most successful banks in America, and it's in, I think, North Dakota. And they've never had loss. They have nothing but a profit, and it's just a bank for the people. We don't have banks for people anymore, for crying out loud.
No. Well, John, we've got our first caller. We're going to talk to Aaron and get his question for you in just a sec, but I need to say thank you to English Patriot 70. It says Zachary is Johnny's nephew who looks exactly like RP, honest. Then let's see. We've also got Michael Farmer joined as a member. Dale Bercier says, I red pilled a guy at my local grocery store today. I sent him to my channel. I told him he believed it was the best place to start. Where we go one, we go all. Much love. Thank you for that. I appreciate you sending people. Dana Finkler says, I look like Anthony Green from Sousen. I don't know who that is. Tire Queen says, ask Barbour about Harry Reid. We will ask him about Harry Reid after we speak with Aaron. Truly Robinson, thank you for that, for joining as a member. Trailblazer 17 says, RP, you are the Walter Cronkite of today's news. That's an incredible compliment. Appreciate that. Eric Anderson says, rest in peace, Jim Garrison and Colonel L. Fletchy Prouder, USA.
Oh my God, how interesting.
Yeah.
You have the greatest audience. Listen, first of all, I wouldn't want you to be I would not want you to be compared to Walter Cronkite.
Oh, really?
Okay. When Jim Garrison is interviewed, he said the assassination was a no-risk operation because you had the help of the Dallas police. But before he was to be killed, he would have the assistance, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want a lawsuit, of the media, because they would have to start the fiction before the reality of the facts kicked in. And it turned out to be, he gives us a history of Project Mockingbird, and the leading Project Mockingbird purveyor of fake news and fake war was CBS, and it was Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather, who first lied to us about the direction the head went when he was hit by a bullet, supposedly from the back. And then, of course, a guy I used to love, Mike Wallace, hard-hitting Mike Wallace. He is sent to literally destroy Garrison, and you see Garrison on camera in this movie destroying Mike Wallace. You haven't heard language like that since you saw Network or read Williams Shakespeare. Well, nobody could speak like Jim Garrison.
I want to ask
you. The other thing, I think you said Harry Reid.
Yes, Harry Reid. Yes.
Okay. Can I tell you a little Harry Reid story?
Hold that thought. I want to get Aaron's question in here, and then once Aaron's done, we'll get the Harry Reid question. Go ahead, Aaron.
Okay. Hello.
Oh my God, I can see him. Hi,
yes,
Aaron.
you can. Yes, you can.
That's great. That's great.
We're really enjoying your stories. You're a great storyteller, and you've got a lot of great stories to tell. So thank you. Now, when Trump took office, he did release a lot of the JFK files. And one of the little nuggets that I noticed was that they took the limousine that he was shot in, and they rushed it to the auto repair place to replace the windshield because it had bullet holes in it. And that didn't fit their narrative. So
they rebuilt the whole car.
They actually had to replace the windshield twice because it broke.
Yes.
Putting it back in. So that was interesting.
It's not only, it's a crime.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they were doing, they were destroying evidence of a murder.
Yes.
So
yeah.
it's a crime, and all of those people should have been arrested.
Yeah, and I always said that was the day America died, and now
Well,
it's
it is. But let me add this, Aaron, because now you get me, and now you get me worked up about this. It is indeed. It was the day that America died. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I forgot what I was going to say, and it's so important. And it's about the CIA files. After the passage of the JFK Records Assassination Act, because of the excellence of Oliver Stone's film, Congress passes it. Mandates that last October the files are to be released. President Trump asked for some of the files to be released, and then a few months ago he asked for some more, and then the CIA turned them down. I must tell you, there is nothing in those files. Aaron, these people talk in code. There is nothing that says this is how we kill the son of a bitch, that Irish Catholic son of a bitch. There's none of that. They talk in code. The files they won't release are Jim Garrison's files, because Jim Garrison solved the case. And when I interviewed him, I said, are you going to talk to the House Select Committee? He said, no. He said, I tore up their subpoena. And I said, why? He said, because they tore up mine. When I wanted Helms and the rest of them to come here and testify, they literally tore up mine. So screw them. I just sent them my files. Now, the Warren Commission files will be released in the year 2039. Jim Garrison's won't be released till 25 years later. And that's because incredible. He names names. Now, here is something I tell you that is not going to please you, but the truth is the truth. And, the Q movement always says, learn your own truths, even though a lot of what they say is repeated by thousands of people who may not be learning their own truths. You ever heard of a guy named Jefferson Morley?
The name is familiar.
Jefferson Morley is one of a handful of really good researchers. I don't know him. He's a friend on Facebook, but he never talked to me about the film. I don't know him. But I admire him for what he's done. 5 years ago, he brought a suit against the Central Intelligence Agency for the files, but none of the CIA. He wanted Jim Garrison's files. So for 5 years, he's in the courts, Aaron. And 9 months ago or 10 months ago, he has the final hearing in Washington, D.C., and the judge rules in favor of the Central Intelligence Agency not releasing to the public the files of not the government, but of Jim Garrison and the city of New Orleans, rules in favor of the CIA and against Jefferson Morley. And guess who the judge was, Aaron?
Who?
Kavanaugh.
Oh,
really?
Yes. So now what is going on here? I know on one hand, because, Roger Stone was a really good friend of Donald Trump's for 3 years, his advisor. They spend a lot of time together. He has never talked about this. President Trump has never talked about this, but this is just conjecture on my part. I'm like Garrison. I don't want to conjecture on anything, just fact. But because they're friends, Roger Stone wrote a book that became quite popular about the fact that it was Lyndon Johnson who planned the killing of John Kennedy.
Yes.
Which is false. And the reason it got mainstream attention media, because people now, Aaron, said, we can't believe all this bull about the mafia, so we have to have a new villain. So they make the new villain a dead president, LBJ. He benefited from it. He may have known about it, but he had nothing to do with the planning and the execution because he had to stand far and far apart of it. So there's something kind of fishy at work here. Here you have a president, because I know that in their private moments, Roger Stone and Donald Trump talked about the assassination of John Kennedy. I mean, even Bill Clinton did, for crying out loud. And in the movie, you see Jimmy Carter say, we cannot get back to being the America we should be unless we solve the murder of John Kennedy. And there's an assassination attempt on his life, and it's in the movie. And, a lot of people do not know why there are only 2 terms for a president. Okay, now.
Oh, that's because of FDR.
That's right. And why was it FDR? Good for you.
Yeah.
Why was it FDR?
Because he was elected for more than 2 terms, and then when he was in his last term, he become stricken with a stroke, or his polio was too much?
No. In the movie, you'll find out there was an attempt to assassinate FDR, led by Prescott Bush, who was George Bush's grandfather. They had gotten together 10 CEOs, mega billionaires in this country, and they went to a brigadier general of the Marines named Smedley Butler.
Smedley Butler,
and
yes,
Butler,
okay.
Butler goes to FDR and says, here's a plot to get rid of you, Chief. FDR blunders by not hanging them for treason and lets them go. And their residue, or what is running the deep state to this day. Yeah. But the reason they wanted to get rid of him was because of his vice president. Do you know who his vice president was?
Do not.
Henry Wallace.
Okay.
The leading socialist in the United States of America and one of the brightest men this country ever produced. There would have been no Social Security without Henry Wallace.
That's right.
Now, what if FDR dies in office? Oh, my God, you got Bernie Sanders as president of the United States. We can't have that, so we get Harry Truman.
Exactly.
And to show you how deep the deep state is, Harry Truman is in office for 6 months and does not even know that we have an A-bomb.
Really?
We have 5,000 people working on the Manhattan Project, and the president of the United States is totally unaware of it. And it is a deeper state now than it has ever been, because the more and more we go on, the more and more we have to cover up the villainy of the murder of John Kennedy. And so I am very, very concerned about the well-being of Donald Trump.
I think that President Trump is aware of all of this stuff, and I personally believe that he was asked to run for the office of the president. I think that there are people, the good guys, the white hats, if you will, inside the government, military intelligence people who are aware of all of this stuff, and they've been working slowly behind the scenes for years to get to the point where we can take these people out. And then President Trump is going to reinstate things like the gold and silver standard, and we're going to take out the deep state, get everybody out of the way. I think that's going to be coming here.
As Hamlet would say, it's a consummation devoutly to be wished.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
There you go.
Aaron, I appreciate your call, buddy. We've only got a half hour left.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I yelled at you.
No. Talk to you soon. All right.
Care. I think that's great that you have these calls. My God.
Thank you.
You could do a show of nothing but calls one night.
I could. And many people have already said that we need to have you back in the very near future, because I know that we're only scratching the surface of everything that you could possibly talk about.
I'm going to tell you something, Zachary. I love being live for this reason. Everything I have done that was successful from the first morning show was live. Real People for the first year and a half was live. When I did my internet show, it was live. I mean, you could, and so my suggestion, I would love to come back. I could spend forever with you, but in any case, it would be like beer drinking buddies just telling old stories. But the thing is that if I come back, let's start by opening the phones and let some of those people ask some of the questions that you might wish to ask. And you can augment or add to it. And we could have a fabulous time. One of the most successful radio shows in Los Angeles was 40 years ago, a failed disc jockey by the name of Dick Whittington. And Dick Whittington could no longer get the job. He was a drinker, and he talked a little bit about assassinations and stuff like that. They got rid of him. He got onto an obscure FM station at midnight, and they gave him 4 hours. No guests would go on his show.
Sure.
So Dick just opened the phone and he said, let's talk. Now, at midnight, it's quiet. So you don't get any yelling. And you get people lying in bed. And you get people talking about their lives. And, how to make their life better. And things that are real. He became the most successful talk show host in L.A.
Wow.
So because of his success, they tried to put him on ABC during the day. And it didn't work. his magic hour was at midnight.
12
So
to
I would
4.
love to come back. And people can ask me anything because I'm unbelievably honest.
All
There's
right.
an ancient Persian proverb that says if you're going to tell the truth, you better have one foot in the stirrup.
People will definitely do that. You guys, you tell me what you think in the chat. Would you like to do a full 2 hours of just call-ins from the audience with John here? I would enjoy that. Chris Hawkins said, bravo. Jerry Matt W. says, have some Sterling RP because he's from the UK. Dana Finkler asked, Zoom link, it's in there. Herchatter, where we go when we go all, thank you for that. Social Observer says Executive Order 11001 permits the government to take over all health, education, and welfare capabilities. Supermax1234 wants to know your thoughts on Bill Barr. Nicolette Ellis says, love your interviews and news. Keep up the great work. NS Gaming says, great interview. John's such a great guy. Red Pill Doc says he wants us to ask you about JFK Jr. Do you have any thoughts on the situation with JFK Jr.? I mean, he was arguably poised to, finally, get into a political office. He was, gunning for the seat that Hillary Clinton ended up winning as a result of the fact that he was not there. And I think that the circumstances surrounding his death, what with the length of time that it took them to send anybody out there to rescue him, he was a skilled pilot. They lied about, the conditions when he was flying. And I think that there's also some question about the circumstances, is that even his body? They showed some pictures of what looked like a dummy underwater. And I think for that reason, a lot of people would like to believe that JFK Jr. is still alive. What is your thoughts on it in general?
JFK Jr. is very dead.
Yes.
He is not alive. That's a myth that they try. They try to make him look like the white horse at the end of the movie Viva Zapata.
Mm-hmm.
Marlon Brando was murdered and they want the dream to go on. So there's the white horse. John Kennedy Jr. not only is very dead, he was very murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And a very, very good friend of mine, I won't mention his name, but he and 5 other guys he's a very well-known, highly respected investigative journalist, lives now in Florida. I had him twice on my show, and he told the story for the first time about he was called by John personally to come to New York City because he wanted to. When he got there, he didn't say anything on the phone because he figured it was that.
Mm-hmm.
When they got into the office, he said, I'm interviewing you and 5 other guys. I'm going to hire all of you to reopen the investigation into the murder of my father.
Mm.
And just a couple of weeks later, he was killed. Now, I'm going to give you the name of a guest. You can either call him on the phone or talk to him. His name, write it down. His name is Donald Jeffries. Donald Jeffries wrote the brilliant foreword to my book. He has a number of 4 or 5 bestsellers out now. One of them, Ron Paul wrote the introduction to. He has a book called Survival of the Richest.
Okay.
The best book about the economy I've ever read. He has another book out doing well now, and it's called Crimes and Cover-Ups in American Politics from 1776 to 1963. Donald Jeffries has conducted the most thorough and factual investigation into the murder of John F. Kennedy Jr. And it's mind-blowing. I had him on my show, and my God, it was a thrill just to sit there and listen to him unveil the facts. None of it was opinion. So I would suggest either him as a guest or phone him,
Yeah, I would definitely love that. Now, 2 questions which I saw one question from the audience and then one question from me. You mentioned the powder burns on the back of the president's head.
Yeah.
With the if the gun was that close to create powder burns like that, that leaves what appears to me to be a Secret Service agent or Jackie Kennedy herself. Those are the only 2 people who could have been close enough
to Robert Kennedy.
No. I'm sorry. Did you say it was Robert Kennedy? You said it was
Robert
JFK.
Kennedy. The gun, the bullet. First of all, in the movie, Jim Garrison shows us the death certificate from Dr. McClellan. 105, a gunshot to the right temple is what killed him. I'm talking about Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yeah.
Robert Kennedy Jr. was probably murdered by a guy named Thane Cesar, who worked for the Air Force. There were two shooters behind Bobby Kennedy. Sirhan was firing blanks from 6 feet in front. And the reason he was firing blanks, he didn't want to shoot the killers.
Right.
And it's all in a wonderful book called A Lie Too Big to Fail. And I was left all of this material by a guy named Robert Kaiser, who started all of this. Robert Kaiser was a priest at one time, and he became interested in the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, and they were going to run him out of the country. So before he left, because he knew at one time I tried to get Jim Garrison on my show, he came to my house, he gave me all his files, he gave me his book, and that's how I got involved with learning about the Bobby Kennedy assassination. And it's referenced, you'll see it in the movie. Okay. Oh, is that another picture?
It is. Yes, it's another caller. Before this is Dana. He's our next caller. But before that, do you have any theories on who killed Marilyn Monroe? I've always thought that the CIA.
No, I wouldn't give you a theory.
Okay.
If my life depended on it, you have to deal with facts.
Yes.
And I was Thomas Noguchi's closest friend for 2 years. His hobby was painting watercolors. The only watercolor painting I have in my bedroom is one that Thomas Noguchi gave me to thank me for helping try to save his career. And let me tell you something. It wasn't even though this is how the world works in some ways, even though they were having trouble trying to get rid of him with their publicity from the CIA, the LA Times, and the police. People loved Thomas Noguchi, even with his broken English and all the rest of it, because they felt he was honest. What got him finally, and the people riled up to get rid of him, was his autopsy of William Holden. Now, Bill Holden was an unbelievable drunk. I had seen him falling down in NBC a couple of times, a brilliant young actor at one time. And in Network, which is one of his greatest performances.
I've seen
in the best written American movie in history, which is Network, and the writer was Patty Chayefsky. He's in his condominium in Santa Monica, and he's drunk, and he falls down. He hits his head on the corner of a table, and he bleeds to death because he's out. Now, of course, the LA Times and all the local news, oh my God, it's a movie god. He died of a heart attack. So that was the word. Died of a heart attack. Now Thomas Noguchi comes out a couple of weeks later, and he's just talking about the alcohol content in the blood. He doesn't say the guy's a drunk. He just gives you the facts of what's in the blood.
Sure.
And everybody starts to talk about the fact that, my God, I didn't know Holden was such a lush. Well, one of Holden's best friends was Frank Sinatra. And I was about to make the only and the very first visual autobiography of a major star with Sinatra. We were all set to do it. First time ever. He was thrilled. And I've been writing his stuff for 4 years. And when he called me earlier to do it, I couldn't because I was trying to save real people. So we talk on the phone, and I still write him jokes. But then he said, his best friend was not a drunk. We're going to get rid of Noguchi.
Just for doing the autopsy?
Yeah, for telling the truth about his friend. So he said, we're going to get rid of him. So he gets all these stars together to get rid of Noguchi. And they go up against the Citizens Committee to retain Thomas Noguchi as an independent coroner. And guess who the two heads of that committee are?
Who was that?
Myself and Thomas Noguchi's lawyer.
There you go. Okay, so
that's
unsuccessful.
The last Frank and I ever spoke. But I would never say an ill word about him because of what he did for me for all of those years and having me on the Tonight Show. And you know what? And the story of how he happens to pick me to be his writer is a wonderful story in the book. Oh my gosh.
Excellent.
I just love talking to you, and the fact that you have these people calling in. Now, the next guy is Dana.
Yep, this is Dana. Dana, you're on the air with Red Pill. And John, what's your question?
My man, first of all, John, you are a wealth of information, man. It's awesome to hear. Saw you on Tinfoil Hat.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, both of them, man. You are just a wealth of information, man. And to see you so happy in life after everything's gone on, even being a stand-up comedian, man, it's awesome. You're a great guy. Thanks for dropping some knowledge to us.
Well, I don't want to plug my own book, but since you're saying that, first of all, I'm no hero. Because Red Fox once said, heroes ain't born, they're cornered. And Jim Garrison always loved that quote because he was cornered by learning the truth about the murder of Kennedy, and I was cornered by learning about Jim Garrison. So I'm not heroic in any way, but I want to tell you something about the book that I love. First of all, if you love show business stories, this book is for you. If you love to know how the media and America went from once being great now to being relatively mediocre in many, many areas, this is, and it's not opinion, I just tell stories, it's in the book. But the thing that I love the most about the book is one of the reasons that I thought I was a good interviewer, and I was a good interviewer, is because I had no life. And I felt that I was interviewing all these people. They must have found the secret to life. And if I felt I talked to them enough, I would find the secret to life. Well, of course, it never happened. But I heard the word no from the day I was born. And I still hear it to this day. And it is the fuel that keeps me going. So if you are somebody looking for some kind of purpose or meaning in your life, and you read this unbelievable story, when Donald Jeffries wrote the intro, he said the greatest book ever written in the English language is David Copperfield. This book is David Copperfield Goes to Hollywood. And so if you're looking for that, and I must tell you, I must have read 100 books on how to find your way in life and how to be a better you and influence people, and none of it worked. I just had to survive. But if you read this book, that's the thing that will strike you the most. My God, if that guy can do it, I can do it.
It's very true. Very true. All right, hey, Dana, thanks for your call, buddy. Anything else?
Hey, one last thing. Yes. Everybody who is a fan of you, just Google Anthony Green from Stay Sin or Circus Survive, and I guarantee you, Red Pill 78.
Okay. Check it out. I know Circus Survive. I've heard of that, so I'll look him up.
Same band, yeah.
All right. Thanks, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep.
Bye-bye. All right. Now, John, you mentioned before Project Mockingbird, and everybody in my audience is very familiar with what Project Mockingbird is. The clowns in America putting their agents in media so that they can shape the national narrative.
400 of them in 1976.
Yep.
You see it in the film. I hate to interrupt you, but please. There you have Senator Frank Church asking Helms how many people they have writing the news. And it's 400 people. Now, that's a time when we believed our government. Okay, we believed them about Korea. Okay, maybe a bunch of commies. Okay, and Korea is the place you can attack. And we believed them maybe a little bit about Vietnam. So that's a place we can bomb. We became more distrustful over Iraq, but we had to support our president because don't tell me my mother's not a virgin.
Sure.
Don't tell me my president is not honest. Don't tell me my president's a crook. But now we become a little more suspicious, but still, we are there illegally. And already the Iraqi government has asked us to leave, and we're not leaving. We're not leaving, and we have no business being there. So now you had 400 people in the 70s when we thought we had commie enemies, which we did not have, but you thought you had commie enemies. What is it now? We have nothing but fake terrorists.
Yep.
Anybody, you want to know something, Zachary, for some of the things that you and Aaron and some of these people said on your show, they could be arrested right now. I could be arrested right now. Right now. Okay, so we do not have any real enemies. China is not a threat. Iran was never a threat. We were more of a threat to Iran. Oh, okay, Senator Harry Reid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we had this fake investigation into Russiagate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any Russians who voted for Donald Trump.
No.
And now let's say something complimentary about the Russians in case they were successful on Facebook and Instagram. Okay, go out, folks, and vote against Hillary Clinton. We want Donald Trump, and we rush out and do it. Well, if God is looking down, if there is a God, a he, a she, and it, who do you think God will admire the most? The Russians or the Americans? Because if the Russians are trying to regime change in the United States, how are they doing it?
Mm-hmm.
God darn them, they're doing it with a computer.
Right.
What do we do?
Go and invade.
Chile, we invade. It's napalm, it's bombs, it's all the rest of it. After that, now they had 2 nights ago, you have the Knesset in Israel saying they have to get together with AIPAC, the American Israeli Political Action Committee.
Mm-hmm.
John Kennedy was in court when he was murdered to get AIPAC registered as a foreign lobby,
Yes.
which they are. Now, let me first say this about AIPAC. If I were Jewish, I would be doing the same thing. Never again.
Sure.
Okay, I'd do anything. Never again. And then, as a matter of fact, in 1972, when the Munich massacre occurred, when Black Tuesday, a terrorist group, kidnapped and murdered 12 Israeli athletes,
The Olympians.
and the world came to a stop.
Mm-hmm.
I tuned in, and we all tuned in to watch Johnny Carson talk about it. And as usual, Johnny Carson never said a word. He just joked about Doc Severance's jacket and Ed McMahon's drinking. And I was so enraged, I tore up my review on it, went on the air, Zachary, and ad-libbed for 5 minutes what it must be like to be a Jew in the world today. Locally, 24 hours later, not only were there 5,000 requests for that, there was a guy named Carter, who was a major billionaire and benefactor of Israel, and called up and wanted a film copy of it. We weren't videotaped. So management called me and said, you have to come in at noon tomorrow and redo it.
Redo it.
I don't remember what I said. So I had to write it down. And you go to my site and you just Google John Barbour on Munich. It became the official fundraising film for the United Jewish Appeal. Not only for 2 years, it raised $30 million.
Wow.
And when Neil Simon was given the Heart of Israel Award, he called me and asked me if I would come down and MC the show. We became such good friends. He did the liner notes on my second comedy album.
Very nice.
So, I mean, just terrific. So let me say this about Harry Reid and about Russiagate. AIPAC and the Israeli Knesset are so afraid of Bernie Sanders, a Jew,
Mm-hmm.
because he will not go to AIPAC. And did you know that when you become a senator in this country or a congressperson, you don't swear to uphold the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment?
Yep.
You signed a pledge to support Israel.
Yes.
And only 2 Congress people ever turned it down, and one was Cynthia McKinney. Cynthia McKinney is the best congressperson we ever had in Congress.
Yes.
And what happened is the media and the politicians who were in the hands of AIPAC, they gerrymandered the district. She had to leave the country and become a teacher. So
Yep.
I said, because of what, if there's some kind of weirdness going on in the election, and indeed there will be, will there now be an investigation by Mueller or somebody to see Israel's influence on the election?
Oh, I highly doubt it.
Okay, now this brings up an interesting story about Harry Reid. About 6 years ago, when I was just getting into a computer or whatever it is, I saw Harry Reid on the floor of Congress attacking Palestinians for attacking Israel with the Molotov cocktails. That means bottles of gasoline that would explode. And they're retaliated on by American jets and napalm and rockets and all the rest of it. And then I began to do the research. And Teddy Roosevelt, 100 years ago, said nobody should be in a position in American politics to influence foreign policy.
Mm-hmm.
They must be 100% American. And in doing my research, I find out there are 22 Israeli Americans holding high positions. I mean, you take the guys behind Bush, the neocons, were all Jews, but they were American Israelis. And then he was given, do you know that Israel for the last 5 years has a mega $1 million surplus in their economy? And we keep going deeper and deeper in debt. I suggested we open an APAC office in Jerusalem and people that with Christians and ask the Jews to send us some money back.
Sure.
You know? But in any event, I do a YouTube. I'm so angry. And I attack him and because there are also Jews who are not Zionists. There are Jews who are just magnificent people. I mean, if you look at the artists that you enjoy, the musicians you enjoy, the writers you enjoy, the actors, they're mostly Jewish. I mean, Ben Hecht said Jews are the yeast that caused civilization to rise. I mean, what a brilliant thing to say. But in any event, I admonish him because I said, I cannot find one Russian American who determines foreign policy.
No.
I can't find an Irish American. I can't find a Canadian American. I put that up, Zachary, in 1 week. I know nothing about, the internet. I have 80,000 hits, 80,000 around the world. And now it's monetized by my computer guru. So I'm getting a couple of $100 a month from criticizing Harry Reid. Thank God, Harry. Keep it up. Keep it up.
That's fascinating. So I'm surprised they allowed you to keep it up.
Oh, this is it. Last year, I get a message. And I did the same to Bernie Sanders. When Bernie Sanders folded his tent and supported Hillary Clinton, I decimated him because he destroyed hope. I mean, we only live for hope. And if there's he could have run as a third-party candidate. He might not have won, but at least we would have heard about issues. We would have heard about ideas.
Sure.
Discussion of ideas instead of screaming at one another. So I attacked him. That got 50,000 hits. Last year, I get this note from Google. You are being demonetized. Why am I being demonetized? Because of this tirade I have against Harry Reid.
Oh, my goodness.
So we send back a note. Hold it. It's been up there for 5 years. And there's been no harm. He's still alive. Nothing has happened. Why would you take our money away? It was against community standards now. And so, in other words, they said that I was sort of being anti-Israel.
Yes.
And I said, no, I'm not. I'm being pro-American.
Yes.
I said, I've been kicked out of this country twice. I mean, I'm really trying to become an American, okay? This is the only country in the world made up of every other country in the world, the only country drawn on a platform of laws, the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. No country can say that. England had a Magna Carta long after it was in England. So they said no, and they said, take it down or we demonetize everything.
Wow.
So I took it down because, I had my say. It was out there. And now what I do is I do things, the Garrison tapes, I would never take down because they are the heart and soul of what I do. I'm a storyteller. And the Garrison story, next to the American Revolution and the Civil War, is the greatest American story to be told. And it's like a Frank Capra movie gone bad. It doesn't have a happy ending, but I think the ending is yet to come. Because when I screened this, and I mentioned this to you, Zachary, before we went on the air, 2 years ago, 300 people at the Texas Theater where they arrested Lee Harvey Oswald. 300 people there, and 275 of them, like you, had not even been born when he was shot. So I think there's something at work in the universe that is telling people there was a Camelot once, and there may be a Camelot again.
Hopefully someday. Well, John, we've got time for just one more caller, and that's Alexandria. Occasional Cortex is on the line, which it's a nom de plume. It's my friend who's a guy. But Alexandria, what's going on?
Well, I'm so glad, and I'm so inspired by the show, of course, but John, for all your work that you do, and Zachary Cronkite, as I'm going to call him from now on.
Call him Zachary Murrow. The greatest newsman America ever had. Edward
Yeah,
R.
well,
Murrow.
I just want to say I've been inspired. You know, I guess I got a purple pill years ago fighting the deep state. And but before that, I had met a lot of people. I'd worked with a lot of people that were like Google's engineering director and Amazon's money director of accounting, and some cats at Microsoft and whatever. I came after some sex, let's say sex abusers within our government.
Mm-hmm.
And then they came after me. So I went through that. But along the way, I made friends with Oliver Stone's son.
Yeah,
And
Sean.
who
John,
had,
very nice looking
Yeah.
fellow. Could be an actor.
yeah, but he had, of course, like whenever his dad was making a movie, he was hanging out with the Doors, growing up. He was a kid, and then he was in the movie with them, like 13 of his dad's films. So
Yeah.
when he was working on the JFK stuff, he grew up with all these for years. All these people connect to that, and many of the names that you've mentioned tonight, and it's like thank you for all you've done. But anyway, it's led me strangely enough through this now Q movement to finally get back in the middle of the ring here. But I'm actually running for U.S. Senate.
Oh, how terrific.
Very
Good for
nice.
you. In what state?
Arizona.
Oh my gosh, good for you.
And there's a reason we don't say his name, and there's a reason why that's an important place for a great awakening to happen. And so I'll certainly be open about that in my campaign. I'll be anonymous no more here pretty shortly. To a few, I think I'm already, cat's out of the bag. But I want to just thank you, and thank you, Red Pill, as well, for everything that you guys do every day, the decades that you put into this movement, and all of our knowledge combined can do mighty things. And it's so wonderful to see this digital army grow, and what it's
It is
become.
indeed growing, believe me.
And
Yes.
it is bulletproof. It is strong. Our country is strong, and God bless America.
Well, AOC, when you make the great reveal, let's have you on the program, and we can do an interview properly and get your platform out there, and we can hopefully get your base going there in Arizona.
Oh, and I already have one endorsement.
Oh, good.
That will help me throughout my campaign as my sort of my campaign manager.
Okay.
Her name's Alexandria Occasional Cortex, so she'll be available for some live streaming throughout my campaign.
Okay.
She has a way to say things that an old fart like me, a dude.
Well,
Can't
you
really
better
say, so.
you better teach her how to teach her how to spell occasional properly.
Yeah.
Well,
And John, God bless you so much.
Ocasio. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So it's a
Thank you.
Occasional.
yeah.
That's funny.
Anyway, well, thank you so much. Well, that's it. I'm the last caller, huh?
Yeah, that's it. Well, AOC, I appreciate your call, buddy. Good luck.
Great. And if I can ask you just one shout out to anybody in Arizona that wants to be a part of this great awakening and help out, we'll be doing some meetups.
Well, the lady who happens to rent my house, I own one house.
Uh-huh.
It's in Queen Creek, Arizona, and she is the biggest Donald Trump supporter. And she fell in love with me because I was the only one on the air that said he was going to become president. And so I will call her and I'll say, you vote for this guy, okay? And she will.
Great. And I
Awesome.
just want to get the word out. I'm still in the petition process, so I've got 1 month to get the rest of the petitions in. So anybody wants to help out on that, 17 or so petition circulators would be nice.
Great.
That would work. Nice number. But anyway, God bless y'all. And feel free to ping me on this AOC web channel if you want to,
Okay.
contact me.
And that's
about that.
AOC on Twitter as well. So yeah, hit him up, guys.
My Twitter was suspended and deleted.
Oh
So
no! All right, well listen, AOC, we got to bounce because
Yeah.
it's 10:59, and I want the
All
audience
right.
to go watch our doc after this. So
great. Ciao for now.
all right, buddy, we'll see you.
Yeah.
Bye bye. All right. Well, you know,
Bye.
first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of the mods. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to the callers. And thank you so much, John, for your incredible stories. After the show, we will continue the conversation. We'll get you back on here. So I want to encourage everybody who has not yet, go to Amazon and buy the movie, okay? And also any of John's books, but definitely go to his website. You can
I
go-
only have the one book, and it's nothing but 5 stars on Amazon. There's also a Kindle edition. But the compliment that I want to give to you is something that I see nowhere else. And I've only discovered it tonight on your show. In America today, there is no longer a sense of community. However, your show overflows with this sense of community.
Yes.
So I just love whatever you want me to do, come back and be part of the game.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you to everybody who sent in a super chat. Too many to even go over tonight. We've got they're overflowing. So I appreciate it. Thank you to all of you. Thank you once again to John Barbour. And don't forget to go watch Ardoc and Hulkinator after this. I believe my good friend White Hat is going to be the special guest tonight. So as always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am the corruption detector, and this was your Red Pill News. Good luck, everyone, and God bless. We'll talk.